Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I know there's a lot of empty seats on the committee here, but they're actually a lineup in finance of several of our members that they're waiting to testify right now over there. So folks will be falling in as we speak, but we're going to get started. We're going to go actually in reverse order from what you may see. Public debt, then civic engagement, and then elections. Mr. Frank.
Good afternoon.
Yes.
The public debt analysis is the analysis for the debt service that supports the general obligation bond capital program. As you can see on the first page, there's a modest increase, about 4%. This is consistent with prior year increases. I'm going to move quickly through this analysis and just hit the highlights in the exhibits. And I'm going to just mention on page 3, it shows all the different kinds of GO bonds that the state can issue and some other tax credit bonds that the federal government has authorized in the past. On to page 4, exhibit number 1. What this shows is how much of the 2025 budget is going to be principal and how much is interest. As you can see, over 2/3 is principal. The reason for that is that the state has a very short amortization period and the average maturity of a state bond is 10 years. So we pay higher principal and we pay the debt down faster. In some states have 30-year bonds. If you have a 30-year bond, it's about a 50-50 split between interest and principal. On page 5 is a reconciliation that shows what you're paying for in 2025 for the debt service. As you can see, like that subtotal line about 2/3 of the way down, 96% of the debt that we owe in 2025 has already been issued. There is a June bond issuance that's going to be the other 4% of the debt service. So this goes back. We've got 15 years of issuances that we're paying for. On page 6, exhibit number 3, this shows the long-term forecast for the annuity bond fund and debt service costs. This has pretty much one of the trickier issues that we have this year. If I'm going to go down this chart, if you look at 2024, you can see prior year ABF balance transfer. That's annuity bond fund balance from the prior year. That's $70 million. When we went through the numbers, we noticed that there's about $22 million in projects that have been authorized to the capital budget that do not have the funds in 2024. So there's about a $20 million shortfall in 2024. This is not a problem in 24 because, as you can see, the end of year balance is going to be expected to be $42 million. Where it does become an issue is in 2025. It doesn't look like there's enough fund balance in for the 2025 for those capital projects. So what DLS is recommending is that there be a $22 million supplemental budget appropriation in 2025 when we need the money. We've talked with the Treasurer's Office and the Department of Budget Management. We all agree on the numbers. We all agree that there are multiple options for how to address this. And I'm not so sure we have agreement on how to address this yet. But I was pretty much told my analysis was due 48 hours ago. So our recommendation is for the supplemental budget. I think the other agencies have a little more time than we do on this issue. And now the next few exhibits are going to be about the state property taxes. And I guess the question is how good do we feel about the estimates for the property taxes? I'll start with page 7, exhibit number 4. What this shows in the red line is, according to the Maryland Association of Realtors, what the median home sale price is. What I do with this is I've been tracking it for almost 20 years now. And I use this to get a sense of where the real estate market is going. Now, one thing I've noticed is there are some revisions occasionally to the median number, but they're very modest revisions. So those numbers are pretty good as far as what's happening in the marketplace right now. There are also, I have the dotted line, which is for the active inventory. Those tend to have large revisions, and I suspect that dip that you're seeing in 2023 will not be there, or will be much more modest in a year from now. And so another thing I would point out about this is if you look at 2007, 2008, that's about where the peak of the market was during the housing bubble from the 2000s. So remember that. I'm going to go on to the next page. page 8. Oh, sure.
On chart number 4, it says January 2005 to December 2023, but then below it also says January. Does it really mean January to December?
Yeah, the first data point is in January 2025 and the last is December 2023.
Thank you.
It just dropped off.
No, that was my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, on page 8, exhibit number 5, what the red line here shows is what state property tax revenues are. And what you'll notice there is that the revenues peak in 2011, even though I just told you that the market peaked in 2008, which is and that's really a function of how the state collects property taxes. There's two things that result really in a delay first, in that the state receives revenues much less and much slower when property taxes increase. The first is the triennial assessment. So even if property taxes go up, only 1/3 of people will realize anything on their property tax bill a year later. And so it takes then another third and another third to catch up for those increases. So that results in a lag in revenues. The second thing is that dotted line on this page. That's the homestead tax credit. What happened in the housing bubble over about 15 years ago now is that if an increase is above 10%, then you get a homestead tax credit and you don't have to pay those additional taxes that otherwise you might have to pay. And so that's that homestead tax credit going to, goodness, like $80 billion by the time it peaked. And what happened was when the market then turned and the first thing that happens is people were paying less than market value anyway, and it's that homestead tax credit that took a hit, and so the revenue still increased modestly while the home values were decreasing. And the point of this, I guess, is that it kind of shows you that these property tax estimates, at least in the short term, are very stable, and there's not a lot of reason to worry that in the next couple of years, even if the market changes, that there would be a big dip in state tax revenue collections. And final exhibit on this topic is on page 9, exhibit number 6, and that just compares the GO bond debt service cost with the state property tax receipts. The difference, of course, is almost all of it is general funds. There are some small incidental revenues and a little bit of federal funds that we get, but most of that difference is. And in order to keep the property taxes lower, the state policy is to provide general funds for debt service. That was kind of the revenue part of this analysis, and I'm going to move on and talk about the debt service part of it. I'm going to go to page 11, exhibit 7. And what this shows in the blue line is what interest rates have been since 1962, January. I'm not sure which was the first, whether it was a weekend or not January 1, but around early January 62 is when the series starts. And it the red line is what the interest rate was for this 10-year federal treasury note on January 22nd, which is the date I had to close out this analysis and and do it. So that's how that date was picked. What's interesting about it to me is that 70% of the days in this series was above the rate that it was in on January 22nd. And about 30% are below it. And if you look at where it was below, pretty much almost all of it is since the Great Recession. So we've been in a period of very low interest rates in recent years. And you can see how the pandemic in 2020 really brought them even lower. So I think it's kind of interesting to me too, is that if we were in 2008 right now, and I was telling you what the interest rates were, looking back over 40 years, you would say, hey, that's pretty good. If you're in 2024, looking back over the last 15 years, you're like, no, that's not very good. So sometimes where you are in time affects your perceptions about things. I will now move on for a more focused analysis of this to page 12, exhibit number 8. And this shows the same, basically the 10-year treasury note is going to be the blue line there. And what's that's been since the last really low bond sale we had, which was in August of 21. And you can see the interest we paid on that was 1.42%. And we've been paying about 2.9% in recent bond sales as the interest rates have increased. I also have the yellow line, which is more an index of state and local bonds, not federal bonds, just to see. And they move differently but they moved in the general same direction. The red line there is what we assume the interest rate is going to be in out-year bond sales. So we are still and have been below that 5% assumption throughout this period. And unless there's something very too interesting for us to contemplate, even we won't want happening, we'll probably stay below. It seems like reasonable to stay below 5%. We may go above 5%. I suppose that could happen, but it's hard to say. And just to calculate, if the next bond sale, say, is 5.5% instead of 5%, that would add about $55 million to debt service costs. Just to give you some perspective, we're not really there yet, and we don't expect to get there. But that's kind of a risk that is in this analysis. Also, I want to make a point here on page 9 and 13 is the state is going to be issuing more taxable bonds in the future as things from the PAYGO program move to the GO bond program. Just in 2019, we had a sale of about let's see, it was about I think it was a $49 million issuances, and it ended up in like $1.1 million of additional interest cost. The additional cost that taxable are over tax exempt bonds. Second issue in this analysis is the increase in the authorizations that are proposed. And what I show on page 15, exhibit number 10, is that this is affordable. The proposal that you have is, and then that shows that you can see the blue is the GO bond, debt service costs, the red is transportation, the others are things like the Stadium Authority, the Bay bonds, and capital leases. The line there is the affordability ratio. If it's below 8%, you're doing good, and you're well below it, and so you're doing good. Similar analysis is that the debt outstanding to personal income ratio that we have. I'm not going to repeat myself, so I'll move on. There are some issues, though, with that it could move the needle upwards. One of them is additional transportation revenues. If there are additional transportation revenues, the MDOT policy has always been to take advantage of that and to increase its capital program by issuing more debt. And that will push up. They'll get some relief on the revenue side, but it's always more on the debt service side. So that could have an effect. But as I said earlier, you are well below the ratio. So in the near term, that's not much of an issue. A second, of course, is a recession. When recessions come, you lose revenues, and that affects your ratio. One other factor, everything seems to happen in slow motion in this analysis, not just the revenue side, but on the debt service side as well. One of the things is that when you increase an authorization, the additional debt service increases very slowly. And there's a couple of reasons for that. First is the bonds are issued when the money is needed for the capital projects. So if you authorize $1 billion in this year, we assume about 30% will be issued in the first year, 25 in the next year, and so on till you issue it all. And that's because the projects just aren't all going to be ready immediately, which I think everybody in this committee knows that. And so that delays issuances, which delays debt service, and debt outstanding increases. The second is for the first 2 years, only interest is paid, and then years 3 through 15 are the principal payments. So the payments are lower in the first few years. So what does this mean? How does this affect things? Well, if you go to page 18, exhibit 12, it kind of shows you if the two right lines are probably the most interesting. The additional debt service when you compare last year's CIP to this year's CIP. And you can see in the first year, you got to get it out the door pretty much the first summer in order to have any effect in the first fiscal year. And then after that, we can see that it increases debt services $103 million more. What that number on the right-hand side is that $376 million. That's 10 years later. That is after 10 years, and finally all the bonds have been issued for an issuance. You're paying full freight with principal and things like that. And so that's kind of the 376 is where you're going, and the 103 in 2029 is where you are. And one last point, I have an exhibit on page 19, exhibit 13. What that shows is a comparison of Maryland our liability, long-term liabilities to the other AAA rated states. I think Ohio now is one of the AAA rated states too. They were not at the time that this report came out. This is a report that Moody's does every year. And so as you can see, we pretty much, all the shaded areas are either Maryland or states that have a higher liability than Maryland does. And finally, just the fine print about what this means. There's a couple of things there that it's probably should be aware of if you to understand the charts too. First is in Moody's, they say that in their analysis that lottery revenues are state supported debt. Their reasoning essentially is that the reason you have lottery revenues is so you don't have to raise taxes. You also use lottery revenues. They flow to the general fund, and they support important state priorities. So in a strict sense, they may not be technically state debt, but they act so much like state debt, and they look so much like state debt, and they do so much to help manage the revenues and support state priorities that Moody's position is that they are essentially they consider them state debt. Two other issues, these last two bullets I would say is normalization or normalizing the data. Basically, that's making apple to apple comparisons. In the case of debt service, as I mentioned earlier, our debt service is shorter, our amortization period is shorter, so we have a higher debt service. So if you were to compare a 15-year with a 30-year, our ratio doesn't look very good because we're paying it off early. Now, Moody's does not think that this is a bad policy and does not want to discourage states from paying debt early. And so what they do is they assume all debt is 20 years. And so there's an apple to apple comparison then. Similarly with the pension fund liabilities, there is which the discount rate that the state uses, or the assumption is of what the return is going to be. If you have a low return assumption, then you have a larger liability. Once again, having a lower and more cautious discount rate for the pension fund they should not be discouraged. And so what they do, they normalize that as well and assume that everybody pays the same rate and recalculate the numbers. So those are things that I think help, because the last time I looked at it, the state's discount rate was less than most states were. But so even in, like, I'm going to go back to page 13, exhibit 13 on page 19. And even like the two ones in the middle, the implied debt services to revenues ratio, we're still pretty high, even with the benefit of normalizing the debt service numbers. And similarly with the pensions, we're still quite high, the pension liability. On the last page, my last comments are that our recommendation is to concur with the governor's allowance, and concludes my remarks, and I'll take questions.
Questions? Anyone? Thank you very much. Treasurer. See you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. All right. First of all, again, thank you all for having us today. I'd like to introduce, if I may, to my immediate right, Mr. John Martin, my Chief Deputy Treasurer, and to his right, Ms. Rebecca Ruff. She's the Director of Debt Management. They are here with me today. I'd like to also thank Mr. Frank, a special note of thanks to him and the Department of Legislative Services for their thoughtful analysis and perspective on the state's debt. If it pleases you, Mr. Chairman, we have a full response to the issues that were raised in my extended written comments. I believe you all have this, so I won't repeat those in the interest of time, but it lays it out in further detail. I have a much shorter explanation I'd like to run through, and then if you have questions for me, we would be happy to take them, or if not, I'll have John take it. All right, let me start. The DLS analysis raises two issues, one relating to the funding shortfall for capital projects and the other relating to the state's bond rating. First, the analysis notes that the actual bond premium is available for capital project expenditures. It's is less than the amount that was included in the fiscal year 2024 capital budget. The Treasurer's Office is working with the administration and the Department of Legislative Services to explore potential solutions. The important point for the committee to know is that regardless of how we address the issue, the state is positioned to pay its debt service on time and in full. Second, the analysis acknowledges the decision the state has made to increase the annual debt limit for the foreseeable future, despite already being viewed as a high debt state. The analysis further calls for the state treasurer to brief the committee on how the state plans to maintain the highest credit rating and low interest rate as a high debt state that is expanding its bond program. As you know, Maryland has been rated AAA by the three major rating agencies since they began issuing credit ratings. Standard & Poor's since 1949, Moody's since 1970, and Fitch since 1993. The state has maintained its rating in the midst of turbulent economic times because of various procedural protections like the 15-year requirement for debt maturity, which is shorter than other states' maturity standards, and the Capital Debt Affordability Committee, CDAC, process, which lends stability to Maryland's fiscal planning. The value that we all place on having top-rated credit requires us to continually evaluate and bolster the state's credit vulnerabilities. Recently, Moody's downgraded the federal government from stable outlook to a negative outlook. Following this action, the agency undertook a review of Maryland's rating due to its dependency on federal jobs and gross domestic product. While Moody's ultimately reaffirmed Maryland's stable outlook, the report noted that certain factors, such as a structural balance and unfunded pension liabilities, could cause a future downgrade. Standard & Poor's, in turn, is currently evaluating whether to change its rating criterion to emphasize factors that would spotlight the state's economic outputs, reserves, liquidity, and long-term liabilities. The State Treasurer's Office will continue to provide the rating agencies with regular updates on the financial conditions of the state. You have my word that on my watch, the Treasurer's Office will always ensure that the state fulfills its obligations to pay debt service. In advance of the next bond sale in June, I plan to invite the rating agencies to visit Maryland for the first time in over 10 years. I believe we have that scheduled tentatively for May 1st through the 3rd. In advance of that bond sale, I plan to invite the agencies again to visit us. At these in-person visits, we will do our best to showcase all of the things that make the state an exceptional place to live, work, and play. Despite the work that my team and I undertake on a daily basis to support the state's credit ratings, actually maintaining the state's AAA rating is a responsibility that extends well beyond this office. Fiscal, economic, and policy decisions made by the administration and the General Assembly heavily influence the state's credit ratings. Should questions ever arise about how a decision could impact Maryland's credit ratings, please know that I would be happy to share the benefit of this office's perspective. In fact, that sort of self-reflection and collaboration is what has carried our state through many challenging times in the past. To close out, thank you for the opportunity to discuss the public debt budget. I respectfully request that the committee concur with DLS's recommendation to concur with the governor's allowance pending the administration's resolution of the bond premium shortfall. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from anybody? Well, I think that's, oh, there we go.
Always my friend.
Mr. Chair, if I could just take the moment, it's more of a comment. My treasurer, it's just been a joy to be able to watch you at the Board of Public Works hearing, the level of accountability that's taking place and the intentionality. I'm just thankful for your leadership and just showing us exactly what it looks like to be direct, forthright, and say it how it is. So thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know how we're gonna beat that. We might as well just take that and run. Thank you, Ms. Treasurer. You're doing a terrific job. We really appreciate you.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, Ms. Miller for analysis on the Department of Service and Civic Innovation.
Good afternoon, Chair. My name is Madeline Miller, and today I'll be presenting the DLS analysis of the Department of Service and Civic Innovation. This department was established via executive order just over 1 year ago. That order was then repealed and reestablished by Chapter 99 of 2023. DSCI was only able to spend about $339,000 before the start of the current fiscal year, which is also when the Governor's Office on Service and Volunteerism and the Volunteer Maryland programs moved to DSCI. The working appropriation includes approximately $24.2 million across fund types. And Chapter 99 allows DSCI to retain unspent general funds in 2 special fund accounts associated with the service year pathway programs, which I'll speak about a bit later, for fiscal 24 through 26. Of the current $24.2 million, DSCI reports that approximately $5.4 million will be carried over to fiscal 2025. The existence of these non-lapsing special funds means that the budget grows by $31.8 million in the allowance, as is shown on the cover page. However, $19.2 million in special funds represents a double count, as general funds are mandated or contributed to support special funds usage in fiscal 2025. So a similar chart, exhibit 1 on page 2 shows the true increase in spending power that the department has, which is approximately $12.6 million between the 2 years. Moving now to fiscal 24. During this year, DSCI launched the pilot year of the Maryland Corps program. This program has 2 pathways: the Young Adult Service Year Option Pathway and the Maryland Service Year Pathway Option. Maryland Corps participants are placed with partner organizations and receive at least $15 an hour for their service. Upon completion of the program, participants receive a $6,000 completion award, which may be issued as a taxable cash payment or to a Maryland 529 account. The first cohort includes 274 participants as of December 1st. An overview of DSCI's fiscal 25 allowance is shown in Exhibit 2 on page 4. Most of the funding, including the double counted special fund authorization, supports the 2 pathway service year programs. General fund support to one of the pathway special fund accounts is also mandated by Chapter 37 of 2022 and Chapter 99. In fiscal 2025, the mandate level is set at $10 million. Federal fund grants through GOCV support participants of the AmeriCorps program. Personnel costs make up about 8.2% of department expenditure. The proposed budget change is shown in Exhibit 3 on pages 5 and 6. General fund and special fund expenditure increases are driven by the department's service year programs. Compared with fiscal 24, DSCI reports that it plans to more than double the number of participants, and funding also increases for personnel as 7 new positions are added. 2 are transferred from the boards, commissions, and offices unit of the executive department, and 1 position is transferred to BCO. Additional information describing the cost increases related to the service year pathway programs begins on page 6. As I just referenced, the special fund for the Maryland service year receives a general fund mandate. The special fund for the young adult pathway, however, does not receive a mandate. Chapter 37 established a $5 million mandate to the special fund account in fiscal 24, and that amount grows by $5 million each year to $20 million in fiscal 2027, and then continues to be $20 million each year thereafter. In fiscal 2024, language attached to supplemental budget number 2 reduced the amount of general funds provided from $5 million to $3 million. So that accounts for the $7 million change. shown in the proposed budget change chart. The fiscal 25 allowance includes 10 million in expenditure from the MSY Option Pathway Fund and 9.2 million from the Young Adult Service Year Option Pathway Fund. Funds retained from fiscal 2024, approximately 5.4 million, are not yet reflected in the fiscal 25 allowance. Of that 5.4 million, DSCI reports that approximately 1.6 will be used for the award component of the Maryland Core program for the pilot year participants. Therefore, in fiscal 24 and 25, therefore 23 million would be available for the second cohort stipends and awards, recruitment for the program's third year, and other program costs in fiscal 24 and 25. Additional funds may also be available to the extent that the funds receive donations or that partner organizations contribute to the stipend costs that participants receive. DLS calculates that not all of this $23 million would be necessary for the MSY pathway and YA pathway stipends and completion awards in fiscal 25. If program participation were to double in fiscal 25 to approximately 550 participants, DLS calculates that DSCI may only require 16.5 million to make all stipends and awards for the 9-month programs. Accounting for the anticipated retained but not yet appropriated funds, DLS recommends that the general fund appropriation for the MSY and YA special fund accounts be reduced by 5.5 million, with 2.2 million to be for the MSY pathway and 3.3 million to be from the YA pathway fund account, based on the number of participants in each of the two pathways during the pilot year. One increase shown in the proposed budget change chart that was reported by DSCI to be a technical error. In the absence of an alternative justification for this expenditure, DSCI recommends that the general fund appropriation be reduced by that amount. Changes to the department's personnel complement are described on page 8. Funding for 7 new positions being added to the department does not reflect the standard 25% turnover rate that is typically applied, and therefore DLS recommends increasing the turnover on those 7 positions to 25%. Key observation sections begin on page 9. DSCI launched the Maryland Core program on October 25th. A comparison of the two pathways and the various requirements for participation, as well as the requirements for funding the two programs, are described in Exhibit 4. DSCI published its first annual report on the Serving Every Region Through Vocation Education Act on December 1st. The key performance indicators identified in the annual report are reproduced in Exhibit 5. Some of the measures that are available currently are related to the amount or related to the participation, as well as the stipends that have been awarded. So additional support of Maryland Core program in fiscal 24 came from partner entities in addition to what was provided by the state. Partner entities contributed approximately $621,000 in the pilot year for the stipend costs. And again, the stipend would be the wage component, and the award is the $6,000 that's provided at the end of the 9-month term. Funding requirements of DSCI may change in future fiscal years based on what partner entities choose to contribute. And partner entities are also responsible for covering the cost of fringe benefits for all program participants. And in the first year, that's approximately 2.1 million. DSCI is responsible for the cost of the completion awards, which is estimated to be approximately 1.6 million for the first cohort. A typo appears on page 11 and it says 1.4, it should say 1.6. The department reports that it intends to open the application window for the second cohort in February, and that the second cohort will begin in September with an earlier start date than in the first year. We asked that DSCI comment on the cost of the pathway programs to the state compared to the partner organizations or government agencies. Among the 106 host sites for program participants, there are several sites that are within state executive branch departments, including the Department of the Environment, Juvenile Services, Natural Resources, Department of State Police, Department of Veteran Affairs, the Longitudinal Data System Center, the Maryland Military Department, and the Maryland State Archives and the Motor Vehicle Administration. DSCI has additional reporting requirements related to the program that will be useful for understanding the costs and benefits of the pathways in future years. Beginning with fiscal 24, 2 annual reports must be submitted, 1 for each of the special funds. And then an independent program evaluation must also be reported by July 1st, 2028. DSCI reports that it is in process of developing the request for proposals for that program evaluation. The second observation begins on page 11, and Exhibit 6 is on page 12. Exhibit 6 shows that performance data for the Governor's Office on Service and Volunteerism and Volunteer Maryland components of the department. Growth is estimated for all measures between federal fiscal 23 and federal fiscal 24. However, volunteer hours compared with federal fiscal 2019, the volunteer hours contributed in federal fiscal 23 were 72.4% lower. Other measures such as the total funds granted to community-based organizations grew in the same period of pre-pandemic to now. And one of those is the grants. One of those is the total funds granted to community-based organizations, which grew by 1.3 million. Because the AmeriCorps, Volunteer Maryland, and the Maryland Corps Pathway programs are aimed at different populations, DSCI will be able to expand the reach of each. The recommended actions are summarized on page 13, and I would be happy to take any questions at this time.
Thank you very much. Questions, Senator Roosevelt?
Thank you. Do I understand correctly that there basically are 3 buckets? You got Maryland Corps, you've got the service year, and you've got AmeriCorps, right?
Yes, Maryland Corps is the name that's applied both to the young adult pathway and to the Maryland service year pathway, which was itself formerly known as Maryland Corps.
But AmeriCorps is basically federal funding, right?
Yes.
And the state funding is the 2 others.
Yes.
Okay. So for the general fund, for the state funding, how much of, for FY25, let's say, how much of the state funding is going to paying the participants as opposed to paying for personnel to oversee the system as opposed to everything else?
So I'm going to point to Exhibit 2 on page 4, and I can go over that in a little more detail. So the service year grants, which is the segment that's 9.7 million in general funds, as well as the general fund mandate to the MSY fund, the 11.4 million.
Yep.
Those are the costs of stipends and awards and some other like program costs of the service year programs.
Gotcha.
Then those are the general funds that also will support the service year grant amount. So of the 11.4 and 9.7, which includes additional costs, strictly the 19.2 would be the cost that's anticipated to be in the allowance for the service year, or the 2 service year pathways. The service year pathways will require more funding that's not represented in this chart, to the extent that $1.6 million will be needed of carryover funds from fiscal 24 to 25 to pay for awards to participants, because the 9-month term doesn't end until fiscal 25 in the first year of the program. So more briefly, there's $6.3 million that are there for the AmeriCorps participants. 19.2 is related to the service year option pathways.
So big picture, the 6.3 is AmeriCorps.
Yes.
The 4.6 is personnel.
Mm-hmm.
What does service year contracts mean?
So those are the contracts that are associated with building out the program and getting the online application development running.
Basically. They're overhead administrative.
Yeah, they're overhead administrative, and also include the cost of program evaluation, which is required by statute.
I understand. So as a way to look at it from a state point of view, you add the 9.7, the 11.4, and the 19.2. So you got about $40 million of actually going to
No.
pay folks in the program?
No, because the way that the legislation established the funds for the program, general funds will be added to the special funds, and then special funds will be used to pay the entities that the program participants are placed with, and to pay the stipends, or excuse me, and to pay the awards of $6,000 to the program participants. So you would consider the 19.2 million, the cost of what the program is, but there's also the cost of supporting or seeding the special funds with the dollars, because the special fund balance you can think of as starting at 0. And so general funds have to be added so that special funds can be used to pay.
So that's the double counting?
Yes.
So ballpark is 20 million, not 40 million. Is that what
Yes.
you're saying? Okay, so 20 million is more or less the money we're spending actually on the folks participating in the program.
Mhm.
More, I got you. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other questions? Oh, Senator Hubble.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just want to follow up because you said something, there was a 1.6 million shortfall. And then, so please explain that with your
Okay.
recommendation of cutting 6 million.
Yes, so the first year program for participants is beginning late October of 2023, and so will extend into fiscal year 2025. Therefore, not all of the general funds in fiscal 24 will be able to be expended by the end of the fiscal year, and those funds will be carried over and become special fund amounts July 1st. 5.4 million is an estimate and is so not presented as a number like within the budget bill itself, the text of the bill. So July 1st, at that point, it will be known how much is needed or what the exact figure will be that moves from one year to the next. 1.6 million of that 5.4 will be needed to pay the $6,000 awards to program participants because the 9-month term will end in fiscal 25. So DLS, having estimated what the cost of an approximately 40-week program for 550 participants who are working 40 hours per week, which is above the strict limits of what is in statute, estimated that there will be additional general funds that would not be needed to cover the absolute minimum level of requirements.
So this is a calendar year because the program generally goes from September or October.
It will start in September in the
Right.
second year.
And so it's that gap.
And so
between
there's that
July
gap.
and October.
We've applied the cut to the general fund amount in fiscal 25 only so that there is no barrier to spending any special funds that are available.
Mhm.
And the two amounts are similar in what how we calculated it. So even though like there could be $100,000 special fund cut, to explain the difference between those two figures, that didn't seem to be necessary in order for, and would be counterproductive to letting the department be able to spend its special funds as soon as it possibly could in the next fiscal year.
Okay. Okay, I think I understand. Thank you.
Other questions? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Secretary?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Vice Chairman and members of the committee. Appreciate the opportunity to share more about the new Department of Service and Civic Innovation today. I want to acknowledge the diligent work of our DLS analyst, Madeline Miller. And I'm joined by our phenomenal Deputy Secretary in the green here, Sarah Filmang, and our newly onboarded CFO Jessica Wakefield, and several key members of the DSCI team are in the audience, including Lisa Bishop in red behind me, our Maryland Core Director, and Dr. Sumilia Okpoto-Puyuza, the Director of the Governor's Office on Service and Volunteerism. I believe you have DSCI's full response to the DLS analysis and why we hope that you continue to support the governor's suggested level of investment in our program. We do have a department that's focused on translating the governor's mantra of a state that leaves no one behind through service into a tangible reality. That's what we set out to do in the last 10 months through implementing the SERV Act. We're grateful for the state's investment up to this point, and I hope to provide a quick, meaningful update on where we are. In both programs, the experience is a mix of work plus professional and personal development. The participants have access to a range of wraparound supports to address challenges like transportation, housing insecurity, food insecurity, behavioral health challenges. And as a former director of AmeriCorps Vista, I can tell you that one of the most exciting design features of this program are those wraparound supports. That will make the material difference between a service program that is open to people who are from maybe under-resourced communities or the lower rungs of the socioeconomic ladder, and not only recruit them, but retain them and preserve their ability to finish this program. And to be clear, our pilot cohort includes a significant number of people from the lower rungs of the socioeconomic ladder. And a significant number of our current members in the pilot cohort report that they were underemployed or unemployed before joining this program. So we are in real time making a difference in the lives of people around the state. The goal is that people, all of our members, finish the program with a clear sense of what comes next in their life, whether it's higher education, apprenticeship, or a job. Our inaugural class launched at the end of October with over 270 people in the Maryland Core Service Year option. They're placed at more than 100 employer host sites around the state, serving full time, at roughly 30 hours a week with 10 hours approximately of professional development. There's much more to share, but being mindful of time, I look forward to your questions sort of guiding our discussion here today. I do want to leave you with this, though, that even though we're right at the beginning, our members are approaching day 70 of their service. Something important is happening in the development of this first in the nation program. Our diverse participants coming from 18 of Maryland's 24 jurisdictions are having positive experiences, are having tangible and relevant professional development, gaining traction in work and life. The employer hosts are delighted with the level of talent they're getting in their organizations. And we're learning a great deal in the pilot year that will allow us to refine these programs as we go forward. Maryland is stronger because we have a program that moves hundreds of people off of the sidelines and back into the game. And with the continued investment that the governor's proposed, we're on track to build toward the SERV Act's goal of 2,000 members by 2026 to help individuals find where their interests align with state workforce needs, to give our members a sense of purpose, help Maryland build and retain a 21st century workforce, and create productive service-oriented people who will reinforce that Maryland is a state that leaves no one behind. We look forward to your questions.
Secretary. Senator Heldman.
Thank you very much, and welcome. Thank you for being here and for all of your hard work over the last year. I'm just looking at your comment about commenting on DLS's recommendation and the wraparound services. And one of your objections to that cut is that you wouldn't be able to provide wraparound services to the extent that you would for the growth that you anticipate in the coming year. Are the young people and older people who are participating now getting wraparound services?
Absolutely, yes. Well, many of the members are coming from under-resourced households. And even if they're not, as life intervenes, we're coming to day 70. We've already seen a significant level of need expressed from different members. And to keep them in the program, we've already started working to connect them with wraparound supports to keep them.
Can you tell us a little bit, like provide a little color to that? What does that look like for people and what's the highest need?
Sure, I would, and my colleagues should feel free to chime in here, but members that their bike is the way that they get to the service site. And they may be in a rural area. So that works as long as the weather cooperates. When the weather doesn't, you have a transportation barrier. So working to figure out ride sharing or connect them to transportation such that they can get to their service site reliably. We've had members express a need for food access because they're not able to afford given their family obligations or the size of their immediate household, connecting them to resources or looking at other wraparound supports to meet the need. We've had some housing insecurity in terms of members who were living with parents or living in a housing situation that changed, where they had to find housing on their own. So those are top of mind, some of the wraparounds that we've already seen in the first third of the program, but Deputy Secretary.
Yeah, I would just add that people are dynamic, and so we're still learning some of those needs on an ongoing basis. And as those problems are coming up, we're also rapidly problem solving and connecting people to the resources that they need.
And if I could just say one last thing, I mean, when I was the director of Vista, if I had to make a list of the reasons why people don't apply to a program in the first place, or they would quit, it's the list of wraparound supports. That is one of the material differences of what we're trying to build here. By a year from now, we will have much more, by the cent accountings of sort of the needs that are manifesting. But the core would be 600 people. That's our floor for next year. And those are 600 vectors with 600 potential needs. So we just think that this investment is critical to make sure that we are able to get out of the gate and meet people where they are so that they can do this program.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you.
Here, I mean, inside the Beltway at St. Margaret's Catholic Church. That's a service center. But the person who is the coordinator of those volunteers, the people coming in, and the ones that are being trained, the person at the top has indicated to me that it's about 2 or 3 of them, and they are putting this program together. They are supervising the people who come in, and they're not being compensated. Is that something that you all can look at? And they are very faithful, I can tell you. At 9 o'clock in the morning or even before 9 o'clock, those people are there, and they do a great job of motivating the people, the youngsters who come into the program. They do a great job, but they're not being compensated. Can you?
Thank you, Senator Benson. Is St. Margaret's, are you?
Catholic Church.
What I could
on
say.
Addison Road, and it's wonderful. But the people, and they are strongly committed, but they have indicated to me that they're not compensated. And they go there at 9 o'clock in the morning, and sometimes they're there until 3 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. But they're not being compensated.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Benson. What I would say is that one of the material differences with our program here is that all of our members are compensated. We're not asking people to take a year commitment to do it on their own and support themselves. And again, that's one of the ways that we're getting a broader range of people who can actually serve. We can look at this specific congregation you're talking about there to see what even maybe AmeriCorps resources may be available to support volunteers that are doing good work in the community. But I'm not familiar with St. Margaret's Catholic Church, so I would have to look at that and get back to you on it.
And they're very involved in the community. What they're doing is far beyond what you all are talking about here, because on Thursday they have they've applied for somebody called and told them that they have coats, and they have applied for a grant. They're going to get diapers and supplies for children, for babies. I mean, they're doing a fantastic job, but they're not being compensated.
We'll definitely look at St. Margaret's and see what's possible there.
That'd be wonderful if you all were to do that.
Thank you, Senator Roosevelt.
Yeah, 2 things. One is on the math. The question that I asked the analyst is, so this chart in the analysis basically has $9.7 million down for service year. And so should I assume that's for the 500 plus or minus folks you're expecting for this year?
Correct.
Okay. When I did the math on my phone and just multiplied 39 weeks times 40 hours a week times $15 an hour, and then added in the $6,000, I came up with more like $14 million. What am I missing? Is my math right?
So the service year duration can span to 44 weeks
Oh, okay.
rather than 39. So it would be 44 weeks for 500 people with the $600 a week stipend and then the $6,000 completion award.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. And then the director and I have had extensive conversations on this issue over since the beginning of this. Is one of the things that I've asked all the agencies that come in is, can you identify ways to save money and bend the cost curve? And you have this huge opportunity, more so than any other agency, by moving towards having the employers pay the wages. And I think that did not happen at all this first year, right? Is that fair, or did a little bit?
A little bit. And in the pilot year where we had roughly 6 months to start the agency and recruit, but in year 2 that we'll talk about in a moment, we will increase the investment we're asking from our employer host partners.
Are you setting some targets for that in terms of percentage of employers who will actually pay the wages?
Absolutely. Increasing over each year. Yes, sir.
And those are numbers you can share with us, like right now.
Do we have those?
We could get back to you.
We can
with
get
the
back to you.
full detail.
I'd really appreciate that, because as the director knows, I feel really strongly that this will be much stronger if the employers have skin in the game.
Absolutely.
It's better for everybody if they have skin in the game. If it's a real job, not a make work job. And if we don't have to put so much taxpayer money into it, we can make it bigger. Thank you.
Absolutely. And in the rush, it was a hurry up offense to start this thing in time to launch by the fall. A bright line we set was that even for large employers, they have to at least put skin in the game to pay for those completion awards. So employers having 50 plus employees, that's not negotiable. So, and we plan on, we'll get you the later numbers, but ramping that up every year.
Fair. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And we had this conversation last year in the budget hearing. I appreciate you weren't here for that, but I have a real concern that we're missing an opportunity with our service year members and helping to fill the vacancy rates at the state level. And now that I'm sure your team is starting to think about, like, what does the exit interview look like for this first cohort? To what extent is that exit strategy trying to pair your members with the right state government opportunities to help us meet the moment of the vacancy rate?
Thanks for the question, Senator. We definitely feel that we are designed to be a part of the solution in dealing with the acute vacancy shortage at the state level. I'm pleased to say we have members serving in, I think, 8 or 10 state agencies now. We certainly hope that at least some of them convert and become our new colleagues at the state level. And even as recently as Friday at the governor's cabinet meeting in St. Mary's County, briefing the cabinet on, I need 100% participation here. We need to have pathways into every state agency because everyone has these shortages. And working with groups like MACO, because the county and state governments or city governments are also facing the challenge. And we want to make sure we're building pathways into public service broadly.
Right. So thank you. What is if I'm a cohort member, and I'm about to exit it's going to what date? When would they start, this first class start rolling off?
This new class will start in September, but the current crop ends around July.
Okay.
Yep.
So what is the plan for when that current crop graduates to make sure they have every opportunity of state service or local government service?
I see what
So what's the plan for that?
So the plan is, because when you think about it, it's a very short term in the scheme of life in somebody's career. Every month we gather them in person for professional development day. And that very much gets at, what are you doing next? Every 14 days, a career counselor, a career success coach on our team touches base with their member to go over their success plan. What are you thinking about doing next? Because next is only months away. And for the service year option, there's supposed to be an on-site mentor working with the folks as they show up each day to also think about, this is good for the term, but the term isn't forever. And we really need to think about what comes next, so that by the time you get to the end, you're converting. I really don't want to hear about, well, I'm thinking about doing this, I'm thinking about doing that. We need to know, how are you converting? And I don't want to get out of my lane. I know at least some conversations have been happening with DBM around how our members, as they become alums, can be given some consideration as it relates to, state opportunities, but that's TBD, I guess. So, yeah.
That sounds like a great strategy to work with DBM on. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Other questions? Okay. Thank you, Secretary.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Could my deputy secretary have the last word?
Oh, of course.
Well, thank you again for the opportunity to share more about our work today. In closing, I wanted to share a few brief reflections with all of you about this first year of the program. So a mere 11 months ago, I was in a different role leading a nonprofit organization in Baltimore. And in that role, I was here in this building testifying in support for the SERV Act to create this department. 9 months ago, Secretary Montero was appointed and started to build the team and the new agency. A mere 6 months ago, most of the Department of Service and Civic Innovation team, including myself, started in our roles. And 3 months ago, we launched the first cohort of more than 270 members that are serving across the state. We're learning from their experiences every day as we continue to build this program in a unique way that breaks down barriers for people to serve and uses service as a pathway to education and workforce opportunity. And today, just this morning, we are excited to share with you that the application for the second cohort of the program is live on our website at serve.maryland.gov. We do need your help in spreading the word to each area of the state about this opportunity, just as you helped us to share the good news about members serving in your districts at the end of 2023. You can see we're moving quickly, building something special, and being responsive to the needs of our members and employer partners. Thank you for your ongoing support and leadership to make Maryland a leader in harnessing the power of service. We appreciate your time and commitment to this work.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Elections list. Rye, is that correct? Rye?
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and the members of the committee. My name is Yashodhara Rai, and I'll be presenting the analysis for the State Boards of Elections, SB. SB is a 5-member board charged with managing and supervising elections in the state, registering voters and coordinating candidacy. Its key goals are to ensure that all eligible Maryland citizens can register to vote and to provide a voting process that is convenient and accessible. As shown here on page 1, the budget for SBE increases by $10 million in fiscal 25 compared to fiscal 24 after accounting for proposed deficiency appropriation. The federal fund increases by $1.8 million, primarily due to the purchase of routers for the poll book solution and associated data processing equipment. Special fund increases by $7.5 million, primarily reflecting the local share related to the new voting system and major IT development projects, application support for the agency election management system, and the Maryland voter registration, candidacy, and election management system. Turning to page 3, the fiscal 25 budget includes 2 proposed deficiencies for SB for fiscal 24, totaling approximately $1.6 million. One proposed deficiency appropriation would provide $1.5 million in general funds for bonus payments for returning election judges, as required by Chapter 157 of 2023. The local board elections, LBEs, require approximately 23,000 election judges for primary election day and 19,000 for the early voting period for the 24 elections. According to SB, 5 of the 24 LBs have reported that 50% to 85% of election judges in their jurisdiction are expected to be returning election judges. SB has not received an estimate from the 19 remaining LBs. The other proposed deficiency appropriation would provide 1 new position and approximately $99,000 in federal funds for a Chief Information Security Officer position. Exhibit 1 on page 4 shows a total of approximately $58 million in the department's fiscal 25 allowance. 36.1% of the allowance supports necessary equipment, supplies, and temporary staffing for election operations, including processing voter registrations. SB's major IT projects, the poll book project, the new voting system, and the new Maryland campaign reporting information system, also known as MDCRIS, make up 19.6% of the fiscal 25 allowance. Personnel expenditures comprise of $6.9 million, which includes 54 regular positions. Exhibit 2 on pages 5 and 6 shows the largest expenditure increase occurs in the new voting system major IT project, which amounts to $10.1 million. Although the 24 presidential general election occurs in fiscal 25, the largest expenditure decrease occurs in ballot printing and mailing, approximately $1.9 million, along with voter outreach materials amounting to Personnel data on page 7 shows that the fiscal 25 allowance provides 4 new positions, which includes a Chief Information Security Officer that is added through a proposed deficiency appropriation, but is not yet reflected in the fiscal 24 working appropriation. All 8 vacancies reported as of December 31st, 2023 have been vacant for less than 6 months. Pages 8 through 13 focuses on SB's 3 major IT projects. The first major IT project, the poll book project, aims to replace the legacy poll book system. Although it was originally intended for the 2022 election implementation, it was postponed to be implemented for the first time in 24 election due to procurement delays and cost uncertainties. Consistent progress was made after this decision, and in the 2023 session, SB noted that it had plans to begin systems integration, testing, and then conduct a mock election as the final test before implementation in March 2023. However, there has been delays by the vendor. The interim bills of the new poll book solution were received from August 31st, 2023 through November 2023. Because of this delay in delivering a full tested and accepted solution by the vendor, SB made a determination on September 8th, 23 that the solution would not be used for the 24 elections and decided to execute its contingency plan of utilizing the current poll books for the 2024 election. This decision has been notified to the LBs and necessary steps are being taken to prepare the existing poll books for use in the upcoming 24 elections. Additionally, SB has purchased additional 140 poll books from Georgia to better serve the increasing Maryland population and ensure there are sufficient backup poll books for the 2024 elections. The statewide testing build of the system was received on November 19th, 2023, and a statewide integration test was conducted throughout November and December. This involved 24 LBs to validate the system's ability to work as a cohesive statewide solution. However, the system did not meet the minimum requirements, and a draft remediation plan has been provided by the vendor. A final remediation schedule and roadmap was expected to be provided by January 5th of 24. We request the agency to comment on whether the remediation schedule and roadmap has been received and what further actions will be taken to ensure that the new poll book project is implemented for the 2026 election. Moving on to the cost estimates for the project on page 9. The total fiscal 25 allowance includes $1.8 million for the project, which includes both SB's local share and the general fund share budgeted in the Department of Information Technology's Major Information Technology Development Project Fund. The fiscal 25 allowance in total decreases by $3.7 million from the total fiscal 24 working appropriation. The actual project spending from April to December of 2023 amounts to $7.9 million. This indicates that previously appropriated but unspent funds are being utilized to support costs in fiscal 24. The second major IT project is the new voting system project. The current voting system contract has been in effect since calendar year 2015 and is set to expire after the 2024 presidential election. SB plans to implement the new voting system statewide for the 2026 election cycle. Funding for the new voting system project began in fiscal 24. Due to the lack of information when it was first funded in fiscal 24, a report on the project scope and schedule, in addition to the quarterly updates, were requested by the committee. These reports note that key project personnel, which includes project manager, business analyst, and technical writer, have all been selected and began working as of December 21st, 2023. The RFP award for the procurement is expected by the end of November 24. SB plans to include the non-visual access clause as part of the RFP to ensure that the new voting system follows Maryland's non-visual access requirements. Additionally, SB also notes that the RFP for the new voting system will ask each offeror to document how their proposed voting system solution facilitates ranked choice voting. However, this will not be a system requirement or evaluation criterion for selecting the vendor until it is enacted into law. Moving on to its cost estimates on page 10. In fiscal 24 working appropriation, the project receives funding totaling $541,000, split equally between SB's local share and the state share budgeted as general funds into its major IT development project fund. Fiscal 25 allowance totals $20.8 million, also split equally. The project's total estimated cost is $55 million. This is 46.3% higher than previously estimated in the 2023 session. As of January 15, 2024, the total project spending is $43,637. We request the agency to comment on the increase in estimated cost for the project and the implementation schedule for the new voting system for the 2026 election cycle. There are concerns relating to the simultaneous implementation of the Paulbrook project and the new voting system during the same election cycle in 2026. SB is considering a potential pilot launch of these major IT projects for municipal and special elections to reduce strains on LBs and resources during the planning and implementation process. We request the agency to comment on its efforts to mitigate impacts on their own staff trying to implement these two major IT projects at the same time. The third major IT project is the new Maryland Campaign Reporting Information System, MDCRIS. The current MDCRIS is used for the full management of the campaign finance system for the state. SB entered a 2-year contract extension for the current MDCRIS contract beginning March 31st of 2023, which will expire on March 31st of 2025. The procurement of a new system was initiated in July 23 to ensure that adequate time is allotted for the RFP publication and the implementation of a new system. Funding for the new MDCRIS system began in fiscal 24. Again, due to the lack of information when it was first funded in fiscal 24, a report on the project scope and schedule in addition to the quarterly updates were requested by the committee. In its third quarterly report, SB notes that although previously estimated to complete onboarding of the project team by November 1st of 2023, it now expects to complete recruiting project personnel by February 1st of 24. The RFP award for the procurement of the new system is scheduled for October 1st of 24, and the new system is expected to be implemented by March 31st of 2025. We request the agency to comment on the progress made in its recruitment efforts for the project and its efforts to mitigate impacts on its own staff due to the 2024 presidential election. Moving on to its cost estimates. The new reporting system receives $100,000 in general funds in the fiscal 24 working appropriation and approximately $530,000 in the fiscal 25 allowance. These funds are budgeted in the Do It Major IT Development Project Fund. The project's total estimated cost has decreased by 70.6% to $1.2 million compared to the cost previously estimated in the 2023 session. As of January 15th, the actual project spending is approximately $14,000. We request the agency to comment on the reason for the decrease in its estimated cost for the new system. The DLS recommends adopting committee narrative requesting continued submission of the combined quarterly reports on the progress of and spending on each of the major projects through its completion. Page 13 highlights the DLS's recommended action to adopt the committee narrative requesting the combined quarterly reports on the progress and spending on each of the major IT projects, including the assessment of future risk and their mitigations. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions from the committee? Thank you very much for your analysis. Mr. Damaris. Good to see you.
Chair. And other members, it's great, thank you. Just wanted to say, just a few things here. Just wanted to say, I'll give you, I guess, a little brief information about our election preparedness activities here. So this is basically the first time you're getting a new state administrator in over 25 years. So, bear with me with my first budget, and please be kind as we go into an election year with it as well. So I appreciate that.
You're doing great.
So
I don't know. I can promise kindness from everybody except for Senator Roosevelt.
So, we've had some retirements and departures over at SBE, and we've had, we're filling these vacancies as quickly as possible there, as the report mentioned there. And this is also bringing new people with new ideas and energies to SBE. So it's been great to do this. And one of the other things is that we've been trying to do is convert some of our key contractual positions into permanent staff. We did that with our mail-in balloting position right now. We had basically a departure, and we were able to reclass that into that permanent position because mail-in balloting is the wave of the future here. It's here to stay. So I think that, it was, having it as a contractual position wasn't, correct. It has to be a part of the administration. We have currently one vacancy on our board right now, but that's not going to deter anything from us from our preparations for the 2024 election. We only need a supermajority. So basically we have the 4 members and we'll be able to operate. So that's kind of where, we are at. So, but one of the things that just wanted to touch base with is just how we're dealing with some of the upcoming challenges here. We have started to make sure that we had a lot of turnover also at the local boards of elections. And we're instituting some policy initiatives there to help with retention and transfer of knowledge, which is most notably, we're developing a program called the Maryland Maryland Election Administration Education Program, so that all the new election directors and staff will be up to date on receiving, up to date and current issues of the law, allowing them to have confidence and knowledge to provide efficient and secure and reliable elections to us all. Additionally, with Mayo, I've tasked them to implement a mentorship program so that new election directors are getting some guidance from some of the older ones, as well as already thinking about redistricting for the 2030 election. Because it's right around the corner. You guys are thinking about it already. You guys don't think about it, but we have to think of in 2-year gaps. So this is not something that it comes up quite fast, especially since 24 is already done for us preparation wise. But overall, what we're trying to do now is we are, as the analyst mentioned, with the poll books. We've had I would say, an issue with the poll books. The current vendor did not meet the minimum viable product to deliver for us, which is why in September, my first act was to initiate our contingency plan, which is to use the existing poll books. As mentioned, I scoured the country because these poll books are a little bit old, and while they can handle the election here, they don't make new ones. So I had to go out and find it. Basically, out of the entire country, there was 138 of them in Georgia, which we then purchased and brought up here to use for this election. So we basically have all these poll books for this election moving forward with it. It has, I would say, that implementation has put us behind our schedule because we were supposed to have the new poll book solution for the 24 election coupled with a new voting system for the 26 election. With this, it has pushed us back a minimum of 2 years in our procurement and our staging programs as well. As we move forward for the new voting systems, one of the things to put on your radar is the new voting system. The EAC has developed new, I would say, guidelines for what constitutes a voting system. It's 2.0 right now. Their certifications are going to begin in 26. So we are looking at viable options, whether or not it is viable to do a procurement at that time for 2.0. There was not many vendors that will have a certified 2.0 system at that time, but maybe 2.0 compliant, but not have the certification. So we're looking at all the options currently now because we're also behind with the poll books. So it is basically our strategic planning has to be adjusted, because the one thing that we all know is that cannot be moved is redistricting in 2030. That's going to occur, and we want to make sure that it will be a seamless transition of data when you redistrict and put it so that we can just kind of move it directly in, and also working with the counties as well. We have also tried to address all the OLA findings immediately, with making new adjustments with the Office of the State Prosecutor, as well as once again with DVM and requesting some new positions in the budget for that. And that, we're trying to make sure that we have that going forward. I think overall, with MD Chris, we're on track for that one. That one's on track. We have hired a project manager and a tech writer. So we're trying to move forward with that and to update how you file your campaign finance reports and making sure that it's as up to date possible going forward with that. The technology has rapidly changed, and we want to make sure that our filing programs are top notch as well. So that's kind of where we are overall. Then on outreach, as she had mentioned, we had spent $1.4 million for this, or we're going to spend $1.4 million on outreach. You'll be seeing a lot of commercials coming out, informing how they vote, giving them the 3 methods: mail in, early, or on election day. We have a new landing page, so we're going to start trying to track to see how, I would say, how good this ad campaign is, because then if they start hitting that landing page, we can see, all the demographics that come in. So we're really trying to take a look at the data and trying to pinpoint it and see what's most effective moving forward with it. It will also be something that, as we look forward to with election judge recruitment as well. We've noticed the election judge recruitment that yes, there's the extra $100 if you're I would say a judge returning. That has made a significant impact, I would on our recruitment. We have seen that in some of the counties. I can say in Frederick, they were of the judges that were filed so far, 60 to 70% of them were returning judges. So it has an impact, and hopefully it was a great little piece there. So, and we'll keep on making sure that we'll have a full election judge contingency for the 2024 election. With that, I guess, is there anything else that, oh, I forgot to introduce my my other people here. I just kind of went right into it. Sorry here. Katie Berry is the new deputy administrator here, and Verona Williams is the new budget director as well. So they're here providing more support and I would say more technical stuff that I miss overall here. But yeah, did you want to address any issues that I forgot?
Yes, good afternoon.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee. As in our written testimony that we provided, I wanted to comment on a few of the questions that we were asked to follow up with. And the first one had to do with the poll book implementation, which Mr. Demarinis did review with you. The second had to speak to the increase in the estimated cost for our project implementation. As Mr. Demarinis stated, because we have a kind of adjusted timeline and working with the Do It, we have adjusted some of that scope and timeline because with the fact that it does cost a little bit more money now for voting systems and to help manage our personnel costs as it pertains. Regarding mitigating impacts on our staff trying to implement multiple projects while also performing election-specific duties, we are onboarding contractual staff and project managers to help get these projects off the ground. And we are working closely with our project managers to ensure that any risks that are related to the project are implemented smoothly. And we are also working closely with Do It and have frequent meetings with their divisions. As it pertains to a decrease in the estimated cost for the new campaign reporting system, the project had a delayed start, and therefore there was an initial decrease in that. And the final request for comment had to do with an OLA finding as related to deceased and duplicate voters. So we are in the process of having a new audit schedule and enhancing what we already had as part of our audit process. And the work is still ongoing, and we are of course working to address the staffing that we have as well. So with that, happy to take any questions.
And along the lines too about the deceased voters as well, the state board has issued a new policy on the acceptance of obituaries and cards from funeral homes as well to help start the process, so we don't have to necessarily wait for reports. So that will, especially if a person dies outside the state, they can show an obituary from a legitimate news organization. So we are taking this very seriously and moving forward with it.
Very good. Question? Senator?
Thank you for the presentation. When you go into into an organization or club or to meet with a group, talk to me just a little bit about what do you stress?
Well, it depends on the time.
Depends on the time.
It depends on the time. So right now, if you ask us to go to an organization or a club or a group, I'm going to stress voter registration, because making sure that they're all registered. And also, if you're registered, then it's election judges. Like, this is what we need currently. If it's closer to, say, May, right, for this upcoming election, then, I'm not going to stress election judges or still voter registration, but maybe it's going to be about, are you going to be available, or how do you want to vote? Do you want to vote on early? These are the facilities. Do you want to vote in person? You can vote on election day. Do you want to vote by mail? This is how you get a mail application. So it kind of shifts from like election judges and my needs than to just being like straight out, I just, just come out and vote.
Okay, so. Thank you very much. All right. In other words, you have a list somewhere available so that I could take a look at what you could do if we were to come to an organization where we have about 130 people.
Senator, you let me know. We have someone out there, and we can
thank you very much.
Meet and virtually or whatever, however you want us to come out and talk. But that's one of the biggest things too, is that I want to be more active in outreach, because I think by doing that, it helps the disinformation and the misinformation that goes out there. It's one of the things that I'm trying to be, is more of a trusted source and be more visible as a state administrator here, because the election community is much maligned, and disinformation is very difficult to stop once it goes viral. So by being an active participant out there and being, I would say, proactive in this field here. At least I'm trying to battle back a little bit of the disinformation. It might not stop at all, but it's going to be something where I'm going to be where people can point to me, say, hey, I have a question, and you can trust my answer to being accurate.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Congratulations again.
Thank you.
Welcome. We look forward to working with you for many years to come, you and your team.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And I look forward to this. So, yes.